Hi, everybody. Welcome to Right Angle. First batch of 2023. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Alfonso Rachel sitting in for Scott Ott. And guys, we all know we can look back on the 2022 midterms and the results of which gave you the same level of euphoria as having a dentist tell you we're almost done when you're having your root canal, right? That's it's good news, but it's not exactly the kind of triumphant kind of joy that you were looking for. There is, however, as an aftermath of this, something that looks like it might be a good sign. Because it doesn't matter how many Republicans you send to Congress, if it turns out that they don't act like conservatives, if they don't vote like conservatives, if they just become inside the Beltway versus outside the Beltway, it doesn't matter what D or R they are. It's just more of the same. So this is breaking news as we record this on the 4th of January. But former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has...
Potential House Speaker.
Sorry, yes. I had him confused with Nancy Pelosi because they look so similar. Potential House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who represents old school Republican Party, get along, that whole kind of, we're part of the Washington organism, and you should let us do it because we're not one of these dangerous radical, conservatives like lunatics like Josh Hawley or whatever the case may be. So anyway, he was running for the election for Speaker of the House, and he didn't make it. And what I find particularly interesting about this is a statement made by U.S. Representative Scott Perry, who is from 10th District in Pennsylvania, and he released this statement. I think it was today as we record this, and this is why I think it's good news. So let me just get this out, guys, and you can tell me what you think. This is it in full. Talking about the vote, he said, We've worked in good faith for months to change the status quo. At nearly every turn, we've been sidelined or resisted by McCarthy. And any perceived progress has often been vague or contained loopholes that further amplified concerns as to the sincerity of the promises being made. In his 14 years in Republican leadership, McCarthy has repeatedly failed to demonstrate any desire to meaningfully change the status quo in Washington. Despite our deep reservations, we've continued to work in earnest to find a path forward with McCarthy, knowing that this crucial moment would come. On New Year's Eve at the 11th hour, after dragging his feet for months, McCarthy presented a vague ultimatum lacking in specifics and substance. In an attempt to flesh out and add substance to his ultimatum and our many discussions, we approached McCarthy with an offer to get him to 218 votes, and he declined. Again, this is from U.S. Representative Scott Perry. While he claimed to offer fair and equitable representation for conservatives on all House committees when we provided specific names willing to serve on each, as he requested, he balked. We asked him for firm commitments on concrete policies for the benefit of the American people. When asked to promise votes on 1, a balanced budget, 2, the Fair Tax Act, and 3, the Texas Border Plan, and 4, term limits for members of Congress, he refused. We requested transparent, accountable votes on individual earmarks that would require 2/3 support to pass and ensure that all the amendments to cut spending would be allowed floor consideration. He dismissed it. We demanded that he cease his efforts to defeat competitive conservative candidates in open Republican primaries. He denied it. Kevin McCarthy had an opportunity to be Speaker of the House, and he rejected it. Now, that is a pretty compelling damnation of everything that's been wrong with the Republican Party for the longest possible time, guys.
30 years.
What difference does it, years, decades now. What difference does it make if you elect Republicans who behave like Beltway insiders and we oppose the Democrats' plan of spending $1.2 trillion. We think that number should be $1.05 trillion.
Absolutely, and I think a big problem is this uniparty that I don't even want to say Republicans, man. They're these rhinos, right? That these rhinos have become involved with the Democrats, and that's a big part of why people can't tell the difference as it is. Like you said, it doesn't matter if they're not going to go in there to be conservatives, then it doesn't make any difference. But I want to say for the record that, when you say that you can't tell them apart anymore, as shown by the example by McCarthy, it's definitely not because of Democrats acting like Republicans. It's Republicans acting like Democrats.
Well said.
Is what we're getting. That's why we can't. I know the whole adage of doesn't matter if it's the right wing and it's the left wing. It's all the same bird and it's all the same, two sides of the same coin, the same crap. It's like, no. The problem is that we have these Republican deviants. They're not even really Republicans. They're just rhinos, and they're acting like Democrats, and that's the problem that we're having.
Here's the trouble. Part of the problem. Well, we've got two different things going on. The first is that there's nobody other than McCarthy that's anywhere close to 218 votes, which is what it takes to become elected speaker. And the alternatives are arguably worse. You've got either a pro-amnesty guy, a guy who voted to impeach Trump, or we're going to end up with a power-sharing arrangement with the Democrats, which means the Republicans have pre-rolled over on everything that counts. So we're just in a bad situation. There are two solutions. Neither one is going to happen in the next 2 years. The first is you just got to elect more conservatives to Congress, not more Republicans, more conservatives to Congress. People who actually stand for something other than bringing home the pork and lining their own pockets. And it's very difficult to do that. In fact, it's very difficult to stay a conservative when Washington has grown so huge, when there's so much money and power there. How do you not get tempted? I mean, we're human beings. We are fallible, fallen creatures. And so you get there and you mean well, but now there's, all of this money being dangled, not just for you personally, but for your district, for the people who sent you there. Oh, come on, just take a little taste for their sake. And the other problem is a lack of leadership on the top. Donald Trump did a lot of good, but he did not run as a fiscal conservative in 2016. He did not execute the office of president as a fiscal conservative during his tenure. And fiscal conservatism and the lack of it is what's killing this nation. We didn't get up to 30 some odd $trillion in debt because we're not conservative enough. No, it's because we're too progressive. We need some real fiscal conservatism, and that's going to have to come from the top. We need a Republican president who is a genuine fiscal conservative who actually means it and can herd that damn greedy herd of cats on Capitol Hill. Right now, I think that man is probably Ron DeSantis. I don't know. Did you watch any of his inaugural on Tuesday? There was only one.
I didn't.
There was only one. Oh, it was huge. And there was only one word to describe it. Presidential.
Presidential.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I just read that memorandum, they were talking about McCarthy not being able to commit to a balanced budget, fair tax act, Texas border plan, term limits for Congress, and so on. We know for absolute fact that Donald Trump is strong on at least one of those. But you're right. The spending thing is now so out of control for so long that everybody knows that this money is not going to be repaid. Everybody knows it. It's not going to happen.
And we still pretend.
Right? So money no longer means what it used to mean, and we're going to pay for this because reality still is in the game. But hearing this and seeing the result of McCarthy at least not getting the first round of votes is an indication that maybe it's not going to be quite as much business as usual. We all worked as part of the Tea Party thing, 10 years ago, guys. We were all like frontline speakers for this thing. And the same argument that they're making today was made then. Some of the candidates were weak or so on. But nevertheless, we delivered the House, and then we delivered the Senate, and then we delivered the presidency. And they didn't do anything. And they didn't do anything either because they didn't mean it going in or, as Steve just mentioned, the perks of power are overwhelming.
Absolutely corrupting.
Yeah, I was talking to a person who became a member of Congress, Alan West, and he said it's really remarkable. You'll go out and have dinner with somebody, some of your constituents or something like that, and you'll just be chatting about things, and in the course of the conversation, I like this and so on. What's your favorite drink? Oh, I like 14-year-old Glenfiddich. Oh, wow, and more conversation. He said the next morning you wake up, there's a case of 14-year-old Glenfiddich on your doorstep. Right? It just appears magically like that. And that is hard to resist. But I think the biggest problem is our political position is smaller government. And it's very hard to find people who want to go to the turmoil and the mud and the grief and the sheer misery of an election campaign. It's hard to find people who are going to go through that in order to go to Washington and make themselves less powerful, right? That's a unique kind of individual. Now, there are a few of them out there, but the Democrats always get their A-team into politics because they don't do business or entrepreneurialism or any of that stuff. Everything they do is about rhetoric and persuasion. And I think our biggest problem, I've been talking about this since the midterms, is what's the Republican brand?
Yeah.
When Democrats vote for like Fetterman and Pelosi and Feinstein, they're voting for the brand. They know those people are not mentally capable. Joe Biden's in that same boat, right? They know it. But he's got the brand, and they vote the brand, and until the Republican Party has a branded message that's as easy to understand as, if I tell you woke politics, you may disagree with it, and we do, but you know what it is, right? You know what it is. When we allow, for example, prior to the midterms, when Joe Biden basically said that anybody who voted for Donald Trump was a existential threat to our democracy, we started getting into the discussion about whether or not we're a threat to the democracy. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. The Republicans could not insert the word republic into the debate about the country. So when you're talking about whether or not we're a risk to their democracy, people keep hearing democracy, and one of the parties is called the Democratic Party. And we're trying to say, no, we're trying to preserve our democracy. So we're essentially saying we're arguing against our own brand. And we don't have enough. Yeah, exactly. And we don't even have enough of an idea of what the brand is for us to be alert to these kind of things. We just jump in there and say, whoa.
One of the most telling stories I ever read was, and this is years ago, this was either early Tea Party days or pre-Tea Party days, try and say that one 3 times fast, was Mitch McConnell excusing his big government spending votes by saying, I never had anybody come into my office and ask me to cut something. And all I could think was, you're a Republican, you stupid son of a bitch. It's supposed to be in your bones. When Barry Goldwater first got elected to the city council, I guess it was, in Arizona, in Phoenix, he just started cutting stuff left and right. He got accused by his critics of wanting representation without taxation, and he thought that was the best compliment he could ever receive, because he was a genuine conservative, and he went into office to get government off the people's backs, and he didn't have to have somebody come into his office and say, hey, can you cut this? Because he knew that was his job as a Republican.
That's your job.
That was
Mitch.
his job.
You have one job, right?
Yes,
exactly.
Now, the thing is, when these guys go in there and we talk about how things operate in Washington, I think one of the things I find kind of confusing is I think Trump, he endorsed McCarthy for Speaker of the House. And it's not like McCarthy has shown a lot of favoritism toward Trump. But I guess, when you have, and I think that was one of the bigger points that people went with that were enticed by Trump, is that he would run government like a business, right? That's what we need. We need a businessman. We need somebody who's run a business and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, I don't think it's a good idea to run government like a business, because the objective of a business is to grow. And
that's beautiful.
And government has grown. It's grown a lot. There are things that Trump needs to own up to in what he has enabled the government. It's like, Trump, you do understand. I see you talking tough, man. When you talk tough with the people of foreign nations, but your job is to be the law enforcement and protect us from enemies, both foreign and domestic. And I don't think you know who the domestic enemies are. You keep taking counsel from domestic enemies, and you get behind our domestic enemies, and they have gotten to you. And they showed you the door, and
the Fauci chief among them. Right?
Exactly, man. And and the thing about Democrats, even though they live off the government trough, they've made it a business. They've made it a business. I mean, hey man, when they go out as millionaires after or able to become like millionaires while they're holding office, it's a business for them as an entity among themselves. So whatever dealings that they're doing, they've promoted a brand. And the brand sticks out more than their image. That's why you can have somebody like Biden, who's supposed to be everything that they hate, become president, right? Even though he cheated. But their business is not only having the brand for themselves, but they've made it a business to brand us. They can brand us whatever they want.
That's exactly right.
That's their business. And they are domestic enemies. And even people like Donald Trump, it's like, I voted for him both times. I don't have no regrets about that. But I think he's missed, even like putting his brand behind Kevin McCarthy. I'm like, I don't know if you really know who these people are.
Well, that's a great point, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but British politics are sometimes pretty opaque. But basically, when we're talking about the brand, in a British election, if the Conservatives are running for a particular seat, they don't even necessarily have to announce who the candidate is. They're going to supply a candidate. They want the seat. That's what the campaign is about. For middle Ipswich upon the, the Bolton, that seat, we want that seat to be Liberal Party, Conservative Party, or so on, and that's how it goes. And then it's almost like, well, we'll find a seat for you, right? We'll find a safe conservative seat for you, a safe liberal seat for you, and so that's a kind of extreme example of what we've got here, where people are voting not for the individual at all; they're voting for the party for that particular district, and we don't have a brand, and that's a major problem. I think the thing about President Trump is, I think people felt this before he was elected, and I think the reason he's still as loved as he is today is because people still feel this. Whether or not he ran the government as a business or whether it's possible, I think the one thing that everybody loves about Donald Trump is they know that he's not one of them, right? Period. That's ultimately it. He is not one of them. When everybody, sometimes how can you support this guy? It's like, well, first of all, if you look at what he's done more good for minorities, that whole argument, right? But basically, I say the reason I'm voting for him is because he's not one of them. He's not one of you. He doesn't need it. Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden both managed to find a way to make $150 million off of a life of public service at a few $100,000 a year, right? And obviously, they're seduced by the money. But becoming president of the United States was a pay cut for Trump. It was a major pay cut. It was such a pay cut for him that he essentially I don't need it. It's incidental, right? It's pocket change. And when you have that kind of freedom from financial temptation, because you've already got the stuff that they're dangling in front. I don't need to fly on Air Force Two, right? My private jet is much nicer than Air Force Two, and this is a thing Trump constantly says, and it drives most people on the left crazy. But he's not one of them. I think looking back on his presidency and going forward, I think you're exactly right. So I think in my mind, there's no question that he has America's best interest at heart and the best interest of the American people at heart. He does have a problem. He does have a problem identifying. I think Donald Trump's fundamental problem is, and this extends to most conservatives, is I think he simply can't believe that people could be as duplicitous as they are.
I see that.
Yeah, there's something.
It's just like, I just can't be.
There's something that occurred to me a few months ago that I keep forgetting to share on this show. It's very brief. And that is when Zoe said, it reminded me when Zoe said Trump wanted to run the government like a business. He seemed to come in with the assumption that the executive branch would be like a business, that when a new boss comes into town, he tells them what to do and then they do it. That's not how Washington works. Everybody's got their own agenda, and if you don't write them and then fire them if they don't, guess what? They're going to follow their agenda, not yours. And I think if Trump learned anything from his successes and his failures as president, I would hope it is that lesson right there.
Indeed,
I couldn't agree more.
Really quick, Bill. Speaking of the brand, I think we try to find the light at the end of the tunnel in all this. We know that things are going to get crazy, man, but we're just trying to find flipping beacons of sanity where we can. Mm-hmm. Speaking of the brand, I think you got a group of people just like the people that you mentioned before who brought this charge against Kevin McCarthy and why he basically lost. They're trying to promote and say, hey, we need to stop getting behind so much promoting a candidate and start promoting conservatism. And they're vetting this guy right now. I think what's his name, Byron Donalds, for House Speaker is who they're getting behind right now. And man, I don't even think, and I'm not trying to inject a race narrative into this, but we're just talking about in terms of historically holding up conservatism. A patriarch of the Republican Party was Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass himself, right? I think Frederick Douglass served as Speaker of the House pro tem during. I think it was Frederick. I don't know if it was Frederick Douglass, but without question, there was a black American who was Speaker of the House pro tem in the 1860s. Yeah, forgive me, folks, if I've got the wrong figure on that. I should know. But you got the right point, right? There's no question. There was a black Speaker of the House pro tem in the Republican Party in the 1860s after the Civil War. So it's been a minute. I don't know of anybody since then, right? And y'all, and I'm not trying to make I'm not trying to say this. Hey, we're going to have a black speaker. I'm not saying that. The bottom line is that if we're looking for a person who's not trying to promote a candidate, but does this person square up with conservative values? What Abraham Lincoln was talking about, adhering and sticking to the principles of old, hence Grand Whole Party, what the founders had in mind. It's like that could be a road that we're going down or should be going forward with looking at Byron Donalds. Like I said, my point is, it's been a minute, and are we trying to? Is this a point where we're trying to look at those old virtues, those solid old virtues that have held up for so long?
Well, we have to face the fact that we live in the politics of the real, that we live in the real world. It'd be nice if racial identity cards weren't played in the real world and we could judge people on individual merit, but nevertheless, that's the environment, that's the ocean that we swim in. So as far as this guy goes as a potential speaker, if his heart is in the right place, right, if he really believes this conservative idea, and he seems to, then by all means. And if you get the benefit of having a black Speaker of the House as a bonus to use against the people that make everything about race, then that's fine. But you got to be careful, and I don't think this is the case for this guy, but remember, was it Michael Steele, right? When we were going to make him the head of the Republican Party. And he's now become about as vocal a critic of conservatism as anything could be. So if the guy's got the message and he's got the right idea, then let's vote for him no matter what he looks like. If it turns out that you get as a bonus, when I say as a bonus to our philosophy, we want the best guy there. If the best guy there happens to be black and it gives you some ammunition against the ongoing branding of the Republicans as a party of racists, then that's just a benefit, right? It's just a little extra cherry on the top. So just to wrap this up, look, as Zoe mentioned, or Steve both, we like to present positive news when we can find it. It's not whistling past the graveyard. It's just, when you get nothing but negative news, positive news just needs to be in there for the balance. I am seeing guys like Josh Hawley and Rand Paul, Ted Cruz. I know they're all senators, but I am seeing a kind of a lack of shame, right? When I see these guys going after the people they're going after, they're not ashamed to be Republicans. They're not ashamed to be in favor of the United States. They're not ashamed to say this is illegal, immoral, and wrong. It's unconstitutional. And we've got a really great bench. I don't want to bring up the DeSantis-Trump thing because that's going to have to play out over 2 years, and I don't know how that's going to go. But one thing that does bear mentioning is when people who supported Donald Trump thought he's going to run the government like a business, I'm sure he would have run it like a business, except with the government, you don't just get to go in and fire all the Democrats. That's a Congress. That's the way it's supposed to be. What DeSantis appears to have accomplished in Florida is not just that he knows how to run a government to produce the same results as a well-run business, which means you got to work through the legislature, right? He's not just done it himself. He has cleaned the table. For the first time in U.S. history, Steve, you know better than I do, but there's not a single Democratic representative from the state of Florida.
No, they've got some reps there, but not many. I want to say Florida has 29 seats, and I think 23 of them are held by Republicans. I mean, it's huge.
It's definitely going in the right direction.
Oh yeah.
Right? So,
but I mean, there are districts in Miami they're never going to elect a Republican.
Yeah, that's what they said, and then he comes along. So all I'm trying to say is, look, the fact that the default candidate, right, the status quo candidate, wasn't swept to an immediate victory is an indication that the Congress is starting to show exactly what was mentioned in this really quite remarkable memo that was put out by Scott Perry, that we're mad as hell. We're not going to take it anymore. Now, whether or not that results in a different speaker is yet to be determined as we record this. But just the fact that there's enough pushback against the establishment so that he didn't win on the first vote when he's essentially, as Steve pointed out, really as a one-person race, right? That is an indication that the people that we have elected to this latest Congress, at least in terms of proportions, sound like they're starting to mean a little more like they mean business. That's good news for all of us. For Steve Green and Alfonso Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks very much for joining us. We'd love to have your support over at BillWhittle.com if you want to be a part of keeping these messages out so you don't go completely bat guano crazy. We'd love to have you join us over in the membership over there. You can make a one-time donation as well as if you like, because we don't get to take money from you by force, and as much as we dearly wish that we could. We'll see you next time right here on Right Angle.